switch to the overworld since that's kind of the focus this week. Or some of the focus, I guess. Okay, so this is going to be the first episode of Saucehead Sports Club Weekly Recap. The basic idea is every week I'm going to do a stream for about an hour, I'd say, and talk about what I did that week, and if I learned anything cool, like I'll share what I learned, and then I'll respond to questions and like talk about the different tech stuff if anybody's interested in that, or about the art or whatever. But this is the first week. I thought I'd talk about the motivation of it, like why do I want to do this? Because it's a little bit inconvenient every week to like set aside time for this, but it's important. So yeah, why do I want to do it? There's the obvious like marketing thing of like every week or every month you want to have like regular content coming out about your game so that people who are following it have like continuous engagement and it's like continuously in their minds. So when your game comes out, that's just like another update and they're like, oh, of course, like I'll buy it now. So that's one part. Another part is more selfish. In 5 or 10 years or like later on in my career, when I look back on my work, I don't have a lot of like footage. I have like GIFs of the game and stuff, but I don't have like how I was feeling about the game or like how I was thinking about things as a designer other than stuff I could remember. So I think this will be like a cool way to have like a record of that for me to look back on later on. And then the other aspect is I think it'll be somewhat useful for new game developers or students or people interested in games but maybe they aren't developers or whatever, to see what it's like to make a commercial game, like what you think about, what you do, how you spend your time, anything like that. I'm still new, of course, to this relatively. This is my first commercial indie game that I'm like leading or whatever. I'm not leading it, I'm making the whole thing basically, but I think that having that as like a resource for me would have been super useful to see like an commercial indie developer like making their game and seeing weekly updates and how they're feeling and stuff would have been awesome. So that's the third reason. Without further ado, let's just get into what I worked on this week. So I have a notepad thing over here on my other screen. This is the stuff. I'm not gonna keep this up the whole time because I want to show you in-engine stuff. But the general idea, I worked on the Junkyard Arena. I fixed up some critters, like there were some bugs. Oh, sorry about that. Got an office dog here. Yeah, I fixed up some weird like movement bugs and like jittering bugs and stuff with some creatures. I improved some of the dialogue system of like sometimes boxes would be the wrong size or like text would fill out. Well, let me show you what these dialogue boxes look like at all. Well, I'll get to that in a bit. Camera settings. I made this cool tool to preview what cameras are going to actually look like in the game from like this like a bit removed setup I use. Like this red box you see is like a camera zone, and when the players are in this zone, they have like a certain the camera wants to be in a certain position and look from a certain direction, and I made a tool, as you can see here, to like show me what's it going to look like when the camera target is at this green dot over here, and so I can, without having to play the game and like go to that spot, I can just see it in the editor. So I made that thing. Starting to Roughing Adventure mode. So in Saucehead Sports Club, there's a single player / co-op aspect where you don't have to necessarily always be competing with your friends, even though that's like the focus of the game, I would say. There's this adventure mode where it's a couple hour experience where you are basically playing through the season of a reality TV show. And you're the competitors, like all the characters are the competitors, and you as a player are competing on the show, and you run around this overworld, this big 3D space which is going to be densely packed with toys and maybe some secrets, and other characters with like mini quests for you. And I've been stubbing in like the structure of that season that I was talking about, so that every day of the season there are a few different quests for you, quests that you haven't seen before, and they need to be placed all over this map in an interesting way, and they need to not overlap, and that's like a whole thing. I've also been stubbing in some of the quests and like working on the quest editor that I created for the game. Well, let me pick a quest that actually has content to show that. Peter's Secret. Yeah, so I have this editor, which is a series of nodes, and each of the different nodes does a different thing. A lot of them are dialogue, but some of them are like branching paths based on like what I did in a previous quest or what I did earlier on in this quest. Some of them are like telling a player to go run to another place on the map or whatever. But I've been adding functionality and fixing bugs and such with that. Overworld improvements. I'll get into that more as I go. But that's kind of a little deeper than I wanted to go with the overview. But that's a lot of the stuff I worked on this week. But let's get into specifics of it. So junkyard cleanup. Let's get over to the junkyard and see what that looks like. So if you're not super familiar with the game, Sausage Sports Club is like has a lot of like a lot of game types and a lot of like there are sports matches and they happen in arenas. I guess I can play and just show you like what one looks like. Put a couple bots in. I don't want to spawn in. I think soccer should work in a junkyard. And anyway, the idea of the game is that you play a bunch of these different sports matches, and all of them work in all the arenas. Here, there we go. The scale's fucked up. Okay. Yeah, so the idea, obviously, it's just soccer, and they're kicking the ball into each other's goals. It's pretty loud. But in Sausage Sports Club, there's a bunch of these different modes, and there's going to be like 5-ish arenas to play in. And so this is the junkyard arena, which I've been working on. There's a lot of stuff that goes into an arena, as you might guess. Making the art for it is just one part. There's also the layout. There's also the gimmick. Every arena in the game has a special gimmick. This one has these trash robots, which sort of wander around looking for garbage, like these car tires, which are physics objects, and the robots like pick out a piece of trash that they want to go find, and then they like run over to it and jump onto it. That's the gimmick of the arena. But I didn't really make that stuff this week. I didn't make this environment art this week. I've just been cleaning up the arena. What that means is, let's see if I can see these. Oh, here, let me turn on collision. Physics, detail, where are we at? Collision, okay. So some of what I did this week was setting up these collision volumes to keep the player and the balls and the trash robots and everything in this arena. Previously it was like kind of hard to play test what the level would actually be like, because balls kept getting knocked out, or the trash robots would get knocked out and then be depleted, and then there's no like interesting gimmick going on. So I worked on that. What else have I done on the junkyard this week? I also spent some time prototyping a new feature, which I don't think is going to end up in the game, but I'll show you anyway, because it's kind of interesting. Collision. Let's turn don't history on, don't click. Okay. So yeah, this is a magnet arm here. It does what you expect. The magnet picks stuff up. but I kind of was having trouble figuring out like a good way for it to interact with the level in a big meaningful way. So for that reason I might cut it. It's also kind of like there's a bunch of reasons that I'm not gonna keep it, but let's look at what it looks like in the level at least. Let's turn on one bot. Let's do alley. Hat doesn't matter, but I'll do scuba goggles. Okay, so you can see on the right here, there's this magnet arm. There's no like line or anything from it. Let's turn off UI as well. Okay. Also just gonna mute audio. Yeah, so there's this magnet arm. You can see it's like interacting with the garbage somewhat. If I like move it, the magnet arm or the magnet tries to follow it, and it's just like a little bit janky. Oh, and now the new collision is like keeping the magnet in the arena. That's funny. Anyway, this implementation of the magnet might have been kind of naive because it's just like straight up physics constraint on this thing that's making the magnet like basically fly around and try to like maintain its distance from the end of this magnet arm, and then all the garbage just like once it enters this trigger sphere, any garbage within that just like gets force added towards the center, and that was my first naive approach, and it's pretty sucky. Like it's not. If I like jigger this around really quick, it drops the pieces, and then it looks super weird. So that approach didn't really work. But also as like a meta thing of like, this is a gimmick for the arena. It's like gotta be easy to understand and fun to play around with, and generally something I like to have the gimmicks in the arena do is give players like a wow moment of like, oh, that's cool. I didn't expect the game to be that complex, or like have that level of detail or whatever. Like in the Bug Museum. I've got this collision off. What's the deal? This guy's not on the collision layer. Collision. Yes. Okay. So in this level, I've got this bug in the background, and he will, if you hit a soccer ball or a paintball or any big like meaningful to the gameplay physics object towards him, he'll pick it up and like grab it and like shake it and throw it back out into the arena. And whenever I've shown the game at conventions and stuff, hey Tim, welcome. Whenever I've shown the game at conventions and stuff, people see that and they're like, oh, I didn't realize that like this game was that type of game with like meaningful, complex interactions. I thought it was just like a simple sports, silly physics or whatever. I don't know. People are surprised by it, and it's the same with the aquarium. People are often taken aback when they see like the tentacles moving around. Which, if you're new, you're not gonna know what that is, but I'm sure eventually in one of these weekly updates I'll come back to the aquarium. Okay, so that's junkyard cleanup. That's most of the stuff I did, I think. I also bake light maps, but that's not really, like, I'm not going to show you the process of baking a light map. Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Okay, so let's go on to critter bug fixes. So these guys, let's play junkyard real quick. So like I mentioned before, these guys go find garbage and jump on it, and that's like their shtick. There's kind of a lot of underlying complexity in that system that that description doesn't reveal. So part one of that complexity is these guys use a nav mesh to navigate. Made games, you probably know what that is, but if you haven't, it's like a pre-calculated surface that you like bake before the game or during the game in some games, but you have like this mesh that defines a surface along which basically AI players can, or well, I'll just leave it at that. Some AI players can navigate along, and that this is like the surface they're constrained to. And trash bots use that to get from point A to point B. And if I say trash bot go to garbage, they can use the nav mesh to figure out like what is the optimal way to get there. So that's part one of the complexity of these guys. Part two is if in the game you hit one of these guys with your face as one of these sausage animals, or you kick them or whatever, they become a physics object, and they pull their legs in, turn into a little ball. I can show you that. Boom. Yeah, he's a ball. Whoop. Here you go. Yeah, they turn into a ball and they roll around a bit, and then eventually, if you wait, they will get up. They stand back up and they get back on the nav mesh. And that, if you're a game developer, you probably just cringe. But the thing of being like a physics object and rolling around and being freeform and not being constrained by this mesh, and then going back to that is like a really annoying thing. Because let's say my ball, looking at my scene view, if my ball ends up on the hood of this car, and then they're like, okay, time to get back up. As you can see, there's no like nav mesh there. So what they have to do is basically like they take a position, they say nav mesh, like tell me if there's a position nearby that's on the nav mesh, give me that back. If it's true, like that's great, we can deal with that. And it might give us like a point over here, and then the ball has to like, or the trash bot has to like move over to that before it can snap back onto the nav mesh and like get up and continue its merry way. And so that specifically, like that transition and that change of state from I am a nav mesh dude walking around in a nav mesh into physics object plaything that flies around and can do whatever it wants, and then the transition back from ball back to nav mesh dude was a huge pain in the ass. Previously, these characters, like their logic, their code, was just kind of all in one script that was a series of coroutines, which is like a set of instructions that happens over a certain amount of time, as the states. So like the ball state was like a coroutine that happens, and then distinct from that, separate from that, the running around the nav mesh is a separate coroutine, and that's cool. That's fine. Like each of those things has distinct logic that needs to happen every frame, or things that need to happen at the start, and then things that need to happen every frame, and then things that need to happen at the end. That's fine. That makes sense. But eventually, it got to be more complex. Like it, the transition from one thing to the other, from physics object to nav mesh dude gets more complex. And if I don't properly like make sure all the right things happen in that transition, which in that previous version was like all manually done in like a collision event when you get hit by a player or something, all that stuff needed to happen there, and all the coroutines needed to be cleaned up, and we need to make sure that only one coroutine is running at a time. It ended up being like a lot of like messy logic that was hard to follow and hard to track like what's going on at any given time, hard to debug. So I changed it to a state-based system. Let's go to TrashBot Physics. Yeah, so the general idea is that the TrashBot has distinct state classes. The eating garbage state I mentioned, the wandering state I mentioned, being a ball like I mentioned. These are distinct ideas, like distinct separate ideas, not all in one script. And within this state system, which I use in other parts of the game for characters, and maybe just characters. Thanks, Tim. So the thing this state-based system gives me is when I say, TrashBot, you are now in ball state. The ball state has a specific like enter function where it's like, here are all the things I need to ensure happen before I can be in ball state, and we do those things, and then every frame we can do some stuff. And when we exit this state, we can do stuff. So the cool thing about this state system is each state handles itself, basically. Like, the ball knows what the ball needs to happen before it starts, or before the TrashBot goes into the ball. It knows what it needs to do on exit to like clean up to make sure everything else can be fine, and that's really useful. Yeah, Tim, tick is update, and I also have a fixed tick that's just fixed update. The way this works is on... That's a good question. I wouldn't have thought to explain this. So thanks, Tim. So my entity physics is like a class that's on the TrashBot or on the player that kind of manages like what state are we in, what happens between states. So it was a good call. Like, we do tick in there. The reason I chose to do tick and fixed tick instead of update and fixed update, since like TrashBot ball isn't a mono behavior, or is it? I don't remember. I guess it is. The reason I chose to do it differently is I didn't want to manage the enabled disabled stuff and like have the option of two things being enabled at once. Yeah, there's that too. Having like an update manager update everything in your game for you instead of you do it. Yeah. The speed wasn't the motivation for me. It was more like clarity of like, okay, this function is special. It's not being used when this component is enabled. It's like a special thing that's managed somewhere else. But I wanted the same paradigm of update for like tick or update versus fixed update. Yeah. So yeah, this entity physics thing calls the tick, calls the fixed tick. When we change state, it calls exit on the previous state before going into the new state, and then we switch the state, and then we call enter, etc. There's also like collision stuff. State base, there we go. Yeah, so I allow this state to override collisions and triggers, and yeah. Anyway, that problem I described with the TrashBot that I spent a bunch of time fixing was kind of like a plaguing issue for maybe 2 weeks or something, where I'd keep like being like, okay, I'm gonna like do even more safety checks and like add tons more logic here to like double triple ensure that this is totally fine. And eventually it got to the point where I had so much crazy logic to like check everything and be really safe, and that when I would come back to look at it, if there was another bug, it would just be like a nightmare to read through. So at that point I was like, okay, it's worthwhile now to split this up and make like each state a discrete thing, even though there's technically going to be a little bit more code, there's going to be more boilerplate, and stuff is going to be in like discrete files, which is annoying if I'm coming back to it later. Like, I need to know that that's how it works and know where to go and all this stuff. But learning how each part of the system works is simpler this way, and so I made that change. And similar to the Trash Robot, there's another character in Sausage. I don't need to look at the code. Let's go to the aquarium. Yeah, here's our boy. So the crab is in a way a predecessor to the TrashBot, where this behavior of moving around the nav mesh, and then turning into a physics object when you hit them. That started with this dude. And actually, there's even another predecessor. But this is the one that does the nav mesh stuff. And similar, the trash bot had all these problems of like weird edge case bugs, and things kept cropping up after I thought I'd fixed it. And so the changes I made to the trash bot I also made them to this crab, and that ended up fixing him too. I feel like I'm maybe getting too granular on some of this stuff, but maybe not. Okay, so that's critter bug fixes. That's as deep in as I want to go. Maybe we can come back to it if there are questions. Dialogue improvements. Okay, let's go to the manager scene. So as I mentioned before, in the overworld there are these quests where you talk to the different characters and do tasks for them, or help them decide an argument by playing a sports match, or they challenge you to a game of hide and seek or something like that. And to do all that stuff, you need dialogue. And so we're on dialogue bubbles, which if you've worked on dialogue bubbles, you know they're a pain in the butt. So there's nothing too special about my dialogue bubbles. There are options. There can be multiple options, and you can pick. Depending on the dialogue, there might be different options, and your responses are saved as data in the adventure mode. So if I say yes to somebody, that might affect the outcome of this dialogue, or this might cause me to play a different sports match or whatever. So there's a little bit more complexity than just straight up like somebody spouting words at me. And how do I want to show this? I guess I will load up the game. I think that's probably the way to do it. So the issue I was having here, and I'm still having it to some extent, and I'm definitely gonna have to put in more work to figure this stuff out. But will this pop it up? I don't know if it will. See some text. So the issue I was having with this thing was if there was too much text, and then there are options, then the options the options take up more space and cut off the top text, and that's not desirable. And it's important to know how much text I'm allowed to have when I'm writing dialogue, so that each of my lines isn't super tiny on the screen, or doesn't take 50 page throughs to get through all the dialogue. So I'm still kind of figuring out metrics of the UI at this point. And part of that is messing with the sizing and layout of this stuff. So yeah, in Unity I can have a layout of text, and I can say this is going to be a vertical layout of UI elements. I want them to be spaced out some certain amount, or padded left or right or whatever. And there's not a lot of detail to get into with this. It's not that interesting, but this is something I spent time on this week, trying to make this more robust and look better in more situations. So that's as much as I want to go into that. Okay. Dialogue improvements. Okay. This next one is the one that I think is the most cool, and the one I was most excited to work on and actually get working in the game. Let's go back to the overworld. So I described this a bit at the start, but if you've tuned in since then, this is the overworld. It's the big open world play area you'll explore to play the game. You use this as a level select. You have to run to the level you want in the world and use a trigger to go into it. So this is like where you'll spend a good amount of your time. Just so you know, I'm streaming over here, just as a heads up. Yeah, so in this overworld space, as you're walking around, you'll enter these. How do I want to explain this? So in the overworld, there's the game controls and plays the same way as it would. I'm looking at chat. 1 second. Synthoid, I'll come back to that once I get through like explaining the stuff I worked on this week. I'll have like time for questions. But welcome. Okay, so in the overworld, in the same way that the game controls as kind of a third-person, far-out camera that the player doesn't control directly, but the game kind of controls, the overworld acts the same way. Like the right stick doesn't control the camera, and so there needs to be some way of letting the camera change direction. As you can see, the overworld is kind of like a half circle shape. If I go out in some direction, the camera pointing forwards isn't really going to make sense. So the system I've ended up with is camera zones, where when the targets of the camera are within these zones, they the zone settings kind of interpolate in and take over the camera. So in practice, what that looks like is I've got this list of settings, including like what angle the camera is pointing at. Like you can see this arrow, this red arrow. If I change the direction, you can see in this view that changes what direction the camera looks. And there's like zoom distance, so that the camera like zooms in and out. And some of these fields are a range of like, there's like the min and max zoom distance. What that means is the min is how far away does the camera want to be when the focus targets are pretty close together. So if like I've got a bunch of characters but they're really close together, the camera wants to stay zoomed in. But if they're super far away from each other, like if everyone's running in different directions, we want the camera to account for that and kind of like zoom out and give you a better chance to see everybody, basically. So that's what some of these ranges are. Sorry about that, dog. We've also got field of view, just like some general camera stuff. Interesting one, override focus position. The idea with that one is you can, instead of like directly following the center of all the players or whatever, or the weighted center of all the players, I should say, I can specify like, I want, when the camera is within this zone, I want it to always look at the statue and like not follow around the player, just like look here and that's it. And that one's been useful for some stuff like this tetherball port, where you don't really want the camera to move around a lot because the players are like focused on one thing and they're trying to like hit this ball. You almost want the camera to like motion track the ball. But that's not what happens. It just kind of sticks on the tetherball port. I guess I don't show that preview in the preview tool. Anyway, there's so that's like the general use case of these camera zones. I also have where's a spline example? I also have an example that's a spline where you interpolate the settings along a spline. So like on this side we want to look kind of straight out that way. On this side we want to look more out to the right. And you can see as you move along this spline in the preview on the right, that like changes the camera angle. So that one's pretty useful. But this is all kind of you kind of need to know this information for me to explain why the preview is useful. um, because like I didn't write the camera zone system this week. I wrote it maybe 3 months ago, and I've been iterating on it since then. But the new system I wrote this week is this nifty camera preview thing that was very helpful for me in explaining it. The basic idea is through having the camera logic, the camera code that the game uses to like position the camera and stuff. I know what the camera should do when it's in the zone and when I have like my focus point of where the camera's looking at, and so I should be able to like figure out what the camera's gonna look like in the game when I'm actually playing it for real and show me a preview of it. And that's the idea I use to make this thing basically. And if you know Unity, you may or may not know that you have the option to create. Well, if you've used Unity and you've done any editor scripting, you understand like anything that is in Unity, in the editor, any window or any widget or whatever, you can do yourself basically. So if you look at any, let's do art. Let's look at an art object. If you look at any texture, you get this nice preview in the preview window. And for a long time, I thought that was like, or I didn't think about it at all. I guess I didn't think of any use cases for it. I think it would be useful. I thought maybe it would be more complicated to make one of those than the task required in most cases. But I came across this blog post by Radiator Yang, I think is the handle they go by. And he talked about how in one of his games, he makes a lot of gay sex oriented games actually. And in one of his games, he wanted to edit the emotions of players, like, or not of players, of the characters in the games, like the blend shape of their face to like give them different reactions and stuff. He wanted to do that in the editor and like preview the face in the inspector window, which I thought was pretty interesting. But he used like the preview thing and like shared his code for that, and I saw it and I was like, that's actually like pretty much trivial to do that stuff. It's just one function that you have to override, and then it behaves the same way as any of the rest of the editor. So I saw that and thought, okay, I'm already doing all this stuff. Let me just like basically copy paste my camera logic and then pipe in the properties of my camera settings into that, and then that's pretty much all I had to do. It only took maybe an hour to get working. And I really can't overstate how important this has been even already to my workflow for this. Because previously the way I test these camera zones and like fix them was to run the game, which already takes maybe like 4 seconds to load. Then in the game I had to run over to the zone, stand in it, walk around, and like look at the settings and like change the settings and look back at the game and move around some more. And worst part of this is once I'd found the settings I wanted, I had to like either copy the component and then paste it back on once I exited play mode, or like remember the numbers, which is just crap. It doesn't encourage iteration. It's not fun to iterate, so I'm not going to do it. With this thing, I don't even need to be in this scene well, I do to select the camera zone, but I don't need to load the game. I don't need to walk over there. I don't need to like copy paste the settings back onto it. It's just done. And so that's been super useful. We can look at the code real quick of what this looks like. I don't want to get too into it because we might have like non-technical people watching. So here's the magic function, draw preview. This is the thing we override. It's Are we overriding this? Or no, we override on preview GUI. Okay. So that gives us a rect of like, where's that gonna be in the window? And I don't really know what the background thing does. I don't think that's even getting passed in anywhere. I think that, I don't know. But using that, we get this rect, and that's like all we need. Once we have the rect, we can use the editor to like draw textures and draw meshes and views and whatever. Okay, so what do we do here? All this code is basically like get all this stuff in the camera settings so that we can use it. All this code is take all that stuff we got from camera settings, apply it to a temporary camera that we've created just for the purpose of rendering this view. Then we render that camera into a texture, and then we render that camera into a texture, and we draw the texture to the GUI into the rect. This R is the rect that was provided by our what was it? The preview function provided by Unity that we're overriding here. So we draw that, we release the temporary, kill our camera, and then last but not least, I added this slider. You can see on the side here, I added this nice slider so that we can test the zoom. I was talking about earlier how if players are all close together, we want to like zoom in more and be closer, because if players are close, we want to like see the action better and maybe like go down a little bit so we can see their faces better, if that makes sense. We want to like orbit the camera down around its pitch. We want to pitch it down, and so this zoom is that number of like how close together are all of the camera targets, and if it's 1, they're super close. If it's 0, they're super far. So that's all it required, and I was pretty happy with how quickly that stuff came together. So that's that. Next thing I did, starting to rough in adventure mode. As I talked about before, adventure mode is this kind of season of a TV show, the Sausage Sports Club, which is like in the world of this game, it's this world famous TV show competition, kind of like the Olympics, but maybe meets Big Brother or any of those shows. I don't really watch them, or like Jersey Shore or something. I feel like that's a good crossover of the two things. It's like the Olympics meets Jersey Shore, where it's focused on sports and athleticism and like world pride, but also it's like these like kind of dumb, I won't say one-dimensional, but maybe two-dimensional instead of three-dimensional characters, like, and this is describing their level of complexity of their personality. It's kind of two-dimensional or like 1.5D dimensional characters interacting, and they kind of are one-minded about what they want, interacting, and what conflicts arise out of that. An example of that is one of the characters in the game, Bon Bon the Flamingo, is really self-conscious and really egotistical and wants praise and all this stuff. And then there's a character in the game that's a camel and writes poetry and is really chill and just like wants to make art. And these two characters collide in a quest, and the idea is Bon Bon wants a tribute poem, and I think Spit is the name of the camel. Spit is just chill, so they're like, I guess, like, as long as this is going to be special to you, and like I'm making a meaningful piece of art, like, that's fine, I'll write it for you. And that's like, and later on, another character writes a different piece of tribute art for Bon Bon, and then even later than that, those two characters find out, oh, Bon Bon kind of plagued us both to get this art. What the heck? Let's like challenge Bon Bon to a a soccer match or whatever to show them what's what. That's kind of like an example of what you would be doing in adventure mode. So roughing that in involves a bunch of stuff. One aspect, going through story quests. Okay, so there's a bunch of these story quests. These are kind of all first pass. Like I have the idea of them written down on paper, or I guess on the internet, but they're not really like, the dialogue's not written. They're the mode they play in conflict isn't decided and stuff, and the resolution necessarily isn't decided. But I went through all the characters that are going to be in the game, and I said, what would this one do if they met that one? What would be the thing? And any time there was an interesting conflict, like something I could pit the one against the other, that was a quest. That's what we're gonna work on. And so during the season, every day of the season, there will be several of these in the world that you can find, maybe 4 per day to find, and then the day ends once you've completed 3 of them or something. Like there are more in the world than you can do, so you have to make choices about who you want to interact with, who you want to learn more about. And then over the course of the 5 days, you get some subset of all of the quests in the game, and that kind of fills your knowledge of like, what is the Sausage Horse Club, who is in it, which characters do I care about, who do I want to win and stuff. And then at the end of each day, there's also like the progress meters of like, okay, who did well that day, like what's going on, and you can kind of try to like side with people you want to win, and but you still want to win the most, you know. You want to be in first, but you can help your friends come in second or third or whatever. So that's the idea of adventure mode. And so what have I been doing for that stuff? So until this past week, none of this structure that I'm talking about, the season, the like five days, and during each of the days, like some quests spawn, none of that stuff existed. So I'm not going to show you like the code of that, but I set in place the structure of the game where you can enter adventure mode, and during adventure mode, quests will spawn, and if you I can actually like log into adventure mode. And some of this is still busted. This is definitely bigger than a week-long task. Fudge, I think, yes. I think all of the characters, all the backer characters are characters in the game. Or characters in the adventure mode, I should say. Okay, so let's see if I can find anybody. We can talk more about that in the question section. So I should be able to find somewhere some characters to talk to. Maybe they're in the beach. Let's see. So my work this week was laying out in the overworld what are the like different spots that characters can spawn, and writing logic of like, don't let these characters overlap. Is there really nobody in the overworld? That's weird. Maybe I busted it. Let's try one more time. Yeah, so like, where are the distinct locations players can spawn in the overworld? And I'm going with a bunch of like manually set up locations so that players can learn like, okay, these are like the 10 places in the jungle where I can go check for a character I know, and those will be like the same every time. What the heck? Yeah, clearly I still have work to do with this, but the idea is every day some number of quests will spawn. The quests are like at a place in the world, and if you walk up, you can talk to them, and they'll talk to you. And the quest is run through the nodes that I was talking about, or through the quest editor I was talking about. I guess I didn't say nodes, but we can see here I've got this quest editor. We start at the start, we get some dialogue, goes through it. One of the characters gives us like a subtask, and there's like UI that pops up on the side that's like, oh, go talk to Remy, and there's like a checkbox that until you complete that task, the checkbox won't fill, and you can't do the next step of the quest. So this quest is like pretty much done. That was like my test quest. So that's a big part of studying adventure mode. I've also been working on the saving of like, if I'm on day 3 of my adventure, like remember all of the quests I've completed, remember what quests happened today, so if I leave and come back, you load in the right quests for the day, and like mark the ones that I've already completed today as finished. So that's kind of all of that stuff's kind of like plumbing, not the interesting part. I'm like building systems so that I can just like dump all this content in as I make the content. So I think that's about that. Overall improvements. Okay, this one's a fun one to end on. As you can see, and you might have been thinking as I was going along, a lot of the overworld looks super unfinished and just like bad, and that's because it is super unfinished and bad. I would say the jungle is like by far the closest to being done. There's obviously still some like jankness about it, like these like white tubes are like not done. Those are eventually going to be tree houses, and these bridges between the tree houses are going to be just like rope, or I should say they're going to be physics bridges. Like they're going to be like planks that like wobble around as you stand on them. Same with that one. There's also like not really any like fun stuff to do in the jungle yet besides this air vent, which I don't know if I showed. I can show that. I basically just want to add a lot more toys and a lot more density of just like stuff to do. Here we go. Yes, you can play on this. If I were to kick like a soccer ball, I'll bring the tumbleseed ball over there. It's like air vent. Other players can be on it. You can dash in the air and knock people out of the vent. You can hit soccer balls in it and stuff like that. That's one example of like the type of toys that are going to be in the game. I'm trying to focus on things that will like multiply the gameplay. If you played Breath of the Wild or seen Breath of the Wild at all, that's been a big inspiration for me for the toys. I would love all of the toys to like multiply with the physics of the game. So that's kind of keeping this area from being complete. Are things like there's not enough toys. Camera zones still do this sometimes, which is not great. I still need to set up collision geometry to keep you from like running out the back wall of this and like falling into the water and dying or whatever. Another thing that's kind of interesting to mention. This area over here is how you get into an actual arena. Like if I walk up to this and I hold X, I'll go into the Bug Museum. That's the pattern for all of the biomes in the overworld. Like you go to a place to go into an arena. but this obviously is not done and doesn't look like a bug museum, so I need to make the art for that. And compared to a lot of the environment art, the arena entrances are kind of like high complexity, and it's important to make them look really nice. So Fudge, remind me when we get to the questions part, and I'll answer that. So getting into what I actually worked on this week instead of like what isn't done this week, or what will be done in the future. So you can see the sand in the sea area kind of like follows the flow of like where you want to walk. That's new. That's the thing I added this week. Over here you can see shaded wireframe. You can see there's like this nice rock platform that you can walk up on and hang out on, and there's kind of like this thick rock wall that leads over to the next zone. It's hard to show you like what it looked like before, but I've been kind of like changing the fit and size of this stuff to make it like more fun to walk on and play on, and like read more as a wall blocking you from going to the next biome, which is what it is. A disclaimer I wanna bring up is none of this art is close to final in the sea. I'm definitely gonna revisit the sand, and let me see if I have a picture of what the rocks will look like, because they look super bad, and I know that, and I haven't fixed them because the method by which I did an art test a while ago took a pretty long time, and I don't want to like do it now and then have it be fucked up. Okay, here on the right here, this is what it's gonna look like when it's finished. These rocks, like, it looks there's a lot of hard edges, it's like nice soft colors. It's even gonna look better than that. The light maps aren't baked in that picture. I don't know if I took a picture of this. Let me see if I can find it on the internet. Anyway, the point is, I know the rocks look bad, specifically the rock walls look bad. Don't worry about that, it's gonna be fixed. But getting back to what I worked on this week, all this rock structure has changed a lot to like help players realize more quickly, like, you can't get over this wall. This is a place you can play on. Something else I worked on this week, as you'll notice, the sand along the edge of this water is kind of like rounded, I guess, rounded and uneven. It's kind of a wavy shape over there as well. I did that for two reasons. One, it was just like not very visually interesting to look at from afar, or even when you're on the beach. It just like looks super plain and look like a 3D model or whatever. You know, a beach isn't flat all the way around. There's like interesting shapes and stuff. The other important reason is I added some like fake rising and falling water to the beach, and when the beach was flat, that looked super dumb. It didn't make any sense. But now you can see, like, it's pretty subtle, but when I'm playing, it helps a lot with the illusion that this is like a living place. It's kind of what the game, kind of what the overworld's about. It's supposed to feel like a real place a little bit. So I worked on that. What else? What else did we work on in the overworld? Let me look at my my list. There's a bunch of other like little things. Like I baked the light maps, and I kind of changed some of the topology here to make this entrance rounder. Like you'll see if you compare it with over here, you can see like this hard flat edge. Let me know if you don't know what I mean. I can try to explain it better, but this one's more rounded, and that's something I'm going to do with the rest of the overworld, or the rest of the hub world, I should say. Yeah, there's a bunch of little tweaks like that, but I'm not going to get more into it than that. So that's pretty much everything I did this week that I can talk about. There's some secret like console porting stuff that I can't get into without mentioning what platforming is, but that's all the stuff. So yeah, I definitely would like to hear